This month on American Heat. In the Bronx, New York, an explosion and gas-fed fireball dwarfs responders. The city of Los Angeles experiences its worst fire in history. An amusement park fire near Cincinnati presents a big challenge to volunteers. And on second alarm, fire and EMS responders in Massachusetts face a harrowing rescue from a manhole.
Okay, where's the helicopter landing?
Dr. Bill Kramer is on scene with this month's college question. Lessons learned by the people involved are coming up right now on American Heat.
Manpower. When the alarm sounds for a major incident with major exposures, you need a lot of people to fight the fire. How you use that manpower could determine the outcome of the battle. Hello and welcome to American Heat. I'm Don Marsh.
And I'm Ron Barber. This month we'll analyze 3 such incidents. Each one had a common ingredient: massive fire and major exposures. Producer Stephen Ray Almere joins us for our first segment. Steve?
Ron, in the heart of New York City, under one of LaGuardia Airport's main flight paths, a Con Ed gas main erupted. The flame shot 15 to 20 stories in the air, and the heat was felt blocks away. Those who got there first were overwhelmed. Roar of jet engines taking off. That's how initial fire and EMS responders described this gas fire at the Con Ed power plant in the Bronx, New York. A ruptured gas main, 3 feet in diameter, exploded, shooting this fireball hundreds of feet into the air. It dwarfed firefighters who arrived first. There were conflicting reports as to exactly what had happened and what was burning.
We had a report of a plane down, and it was right in that location, which is underneath the final flight path for LaGuardia of one of their main runways. So that was a possibility, but we communicated through our Bronx communications that we verified that that was not the case. At the same time, it was a large body of fire. It was communicating to a high voltage power plant.
They had much more than that. But the intense heat, light, and noise from this inferno pushed everyone back.
The heat was an indirect heat from where we were standing until we went to around the back of the building, which the fireball was blowing out towards the water. The heat was pretty intense for being so far away, and you could feel it on your face. It was pretty intense, and the brightness was incredible. It was like having a spotlight on you.
This was a unique fire because of the scope of it. And again, the main problem was we are not quite sure of the extent of the fire. We could see the large ball of fire about 15 stories high. We knew, at least I knew, some of the problems, but I could not see immediately to the exposure 2 and 3 side exactly what we had.
Initially, we brought ourselves back 2 and 3 blocks, and the roar coming out of the explosion was deafening. It's absolutely true. There was very little that could be done until the source of the gas was shut down.
It took Con Ed employees 90 minutes to find and shut down the valve feeding the fire. They had to be careful not to shut off power to the entire city, but just to isolate the valve affecting the fire scene. So, in these first 90 minutes, units scrambled to set up staging and command posts around the fire. They tried to get in close to assess conditions and communicate, but that strategy changed.
Rather than setting up the command post directly looking at the fire, what we subsequently did was move the command post, because of the noise, away from a direct line of fire and sheltered by a wall so that we could communicate like that. Also, the dividing, when you have a large scope of fire or a large area of fire, the dividing of the area into sectors and managed by the proper supervision of deputy chief or what have you, or a battalion chief. The changing of the handy-talkie frequency to the command channel, which we call it, so that we don't have the miscellaneous tactical information being tying up our channel.
While all of this was going on, firefighters set up 3.5-inch hose on 4 ladder towers to protect the exposures they saw. But again, the heat kept them back, and the protection of exposures was little more than a water screen until that valve was shut off.
Con Ed was not too thrilled about the idea of shutting power off for the building for blackout reasons. Once the gas main was shut down and companies started proceeding in there, there was a big concern.
We were waiting for Captain Kilkenny. He was relaying information to us on what he was learning from Con Edison. Of course, like they had said before, we had a problem with communications, and we were told that we would not be allowed to enter the building until the gas was shut off. And when it was shut off, that's when our work really started.
It's important to point out here that a lot was happening at once. This was a worst-case scenario. Not only did units confront that massive fireball, but the fire communicated directly to a power plant with high-voltage electricity. Another exposure was the Con Ed fireproof building, approximately 200 by 500 feet. It had fire on every floor.
From about the 3rd floor on up, as we progressed, the fire problem got worse. 6th and 7th floor, you had a heavy body of fire throughout the different offices and classrooms, and they formed a maze, so you had to use lifelines every time you were making a search. You had a lot of small rooms. They were all locked. You had to force all of them, so it took a lot of time. Once the trucks companies went in there, made a search, forced doors, the engine companies would be right behind you and would start extinguishing the fire. Heat was very severe because of the concrete walls. It was like an oven. All that heat was retained in there. It was very hard to ventilate, very small windows. And obviously you couldn't ventilate vertically because everything was concrete.
Fire also moved to a commercial warehouse containing acetylene and butane tanks. Surrounding the warehouse was a coal yard and fuel oil trucks. The fire scene was directly under one of LaGuardia's main flight paths, combined with initial reports of a plane crash. And there were reports of people in the nearby East River either having jumped or been blown in by the force of the blast. If all this seems overwhelming, imagine trying to initiate and control operations.
As most departments do, we divided into exposures. So we made number 1 being the commercial warehouse with the street in front. The main was in the center of the street. Number 2 was the coal yard and tanks, etc. Number 3 was still that yard, and number 4 was a transit authority bus garage. 1A, which was across the street from the commercial building, was the 7-story fireproof Con Ed building.
Firefighter Bill Palazzolo was a nozzle man in the fireproof building.
The area we were in was used as classrooms. So there was furniture, partition walls, everything. What made it more difficult was everything was cut up into small partitions, classrooms, offices. So you would move into one, and because it was all open ceilings, you'd have to move through a maze while the fire was rolling over your head because there was no per se ceiling. It was all just partition walls. We operated for approximately 15 minutes, 20 minutes until our air bottles ran out. At that time, we started to make good headway on the fire, and we rotated companies in, we rotated out. At that time, we were pretty beat up, and we went down to the street.
Palazzolo was injured when the sheetrock ceiling came down.
It got quite hot. It really banked down low. I was down about as far as I could get and still operate the nozzle. And at that time, things started dropping down from the ceiling, and I was burning my neck. So what I tried to do was bring the nozzle back over my head to cool things off, besides the fire was starting to blow back over our heads. And when I did that, I guess all the water going on top and wetting all the sheetrock, a big section of it came down on top of about 3 of us, and pretty well knocked us the rest of the way to the floor. Myself, I hurt my back, and a few other guys got hurt.
The injured were taken to the EMS triage area and either released or transported to area hospitals.
Citywide advisors to contact you?
That is affirmative. You're advising now you're treating 2 patients, correct?
We have 1 male with a minor leg injury. We have 1 male with minor smoke inhalation. Total of 2 patients.
10-4.
What is the score? Repeat the message.
This time, 2-1 boy is currently still treating their 2 patients. They're at the corner of 134 and Walnut. So we'll advise them of a hospital designation when they're ready to go 1082.
We had firefighters and emergency response personnel coming from throughout the city. And after consulting with the senior officers from EMS on the scene, it was determined that in fact that if we transported them in groups from the same borough back to a hospital in that borough so that we weren't overwhelming any hospitals in the Bronx or Upper Manhattan, that we could accomplish 2 goals. 1, allow the fire department to track their personnel that were going. 2, get them back into a borough that was at least close to the firehouse that they originated their response from.
EMS squads had geared up for many more injuries than what they had.
The incident zone, if I can term it that, was over about an 8 to 10 block area, and we had ambulances and resources spread out over 3 to 6 of those blocks. So the first objective was to have face-to-face contact with the first arriving supervisor. I asked him what he had, and because he was only there a minute or 2, he was again just gathering information. I directed him to gather all the resources and establish a staging area in a safe manner and in a safe area, which he did approximately 6 blocks from the incident. Also in doing that, I asked him what type of injuries we had. And at that point, I was surprised at his answer. I expected an answer anywhere from 10 to 15 injuries, but we were extremely lucky. At that point, we were only treating 3 to 4 patients, of which 2 of the patients from the force of the explosion were thrown into the water, and a recovery operation was already in place with another division, which I termed Randall's Island Operations. I immediately made contact with the police and the fire officials, and we together spoke about our game plan. Asked the police department. I was concerned due to the enormous fire that was present. I was concerned about burn victims, and we do have designated burn centers within New York City. By land, probably the closest burn center was Bronx Municipal Hospital, which was maybe 5 to 6 minutes away. And then we had, not a lengthy, but maybe in excess of a 10-minute travel time to Cornell Burn Center in Manhattan. So I spoke to the police department officials, and they were able to provide for us helicopters on the ground, ready to do medevacs if necessary. And thank God there was no need for helicopter medevacs in burn centers.
Both the operations at the river and these on the street required close cooperation among all agencies. An agency liaison was incorporated into the operation.
My primary concern was exchange of information and making sure the EMS incident commander knew of all the potentials and all the resources dedicated so that he could bring in an appropriate amount of EMS personnel and equipment. By establishing an interagency command post, we had face-to-face communication, which is by far the most efficient at any large-scale operation. Fire department has a rescue liaison service made up of rescue captains whose main goal is to ensure the smooth transition of communication between agencies. And interagency communication was very efficient at this operation. Our operation from our communications on scene was done via radio. Both 400 frequency and 800 frequency operations were done between our different sectors.
To help ensure the clearest communications and accountability possible under these terse conditions, everyone used the incident command system.
I think that for any system, not just New York, that incident command system as a dynamic management tool is important. And as this is displayed in this system here, we started at a grassroots level. So the responding units have an understanding of how the system should work. Obviously, if you have the units on the scene there and you have life-threatening emergencies that have to be dealt with, they are dealt with. We, through our deployment structure, automatically have patrol lieutenants, captains, all the way up to if we need to, the Chief of Field Services that will respond to these types of incidents. So basically, being able to deploy the ICS model is, in most cases, easy in New York City.
Overall, this battle was anything but easy. Besides all of the structure fires, NYC EMS treated 31 people. Of those 31, 26 people, including 20 firefighters, were transported. Certainly, there were lessons learned by everyone involved. Most believe the lessons were those of refining existing SOPs and protocols, because in this worst-case scenario, all the key operations worked, and they worked because all the personnel worked. Again, at this fire, it was most important to stand fast until the gas main was shut off. Some realized that remaining calm until that was accomplished